What could it mean if every student who graduates from ministry in any of our schools has an opportunity for a residency? It can happen, and it needs to.
I'd love to see residency go international and learning how to translate what we're doing here into other cultures in a way that makes sense to them in their context.
What would it look like for a local church to have a resident pastor that was trained and equipped as a missionary and then sent out by a local community into a field that desperately needs trained and equipped ministers?
What would it mean to have residencies that help people in our country who are pastors to those for whom English is not their first language? We have just dozens and hundreds of congregations being developed with pastors that they need residency, but we've got to connect it to their language and place. Imagine if we could do that well.
What will it look like someday when retiring ministers are actually teaching the next group of ministers how to finish well?
What it might look like when the concept of residency or a learning pastor becomes the norm through a whole, the whole journey of being a pastor, where you're constantly learning, constantly being developed, and it translates beyond the 20s into this is just how we do it.
What's it going to look like when this generation of residents become the mentors? It could be transforming because they're going to be further down the road than we ever thought to be. And what could they do to pour into the next generation after them?
I wonder what it will look like when residency begins to have an effect on pastors' homes, when because a resident has received proper shepherding and care, they learn how to translate that into their family, and we see godly families that are serving the church together.
What would happen in groups of churches, what we call districts, if we could begin this spiritual mentoring when these kids start getting touched by God at youth camp? What if the idea of that spiritual mentoring went back earlier? What could it mean for them heading then into their training process, college and then residencies, if when they're 15, 16, 17, they already start dreaming big dreams and we believe that God's actually talking to them and take it seriously?
What will it look like when resident pastors are not only influenced by the ministers in the church, but the business people in the congregation, so that those who leave the church and need to be bivocational are able to do both with great integrity and in a way that honors God?
I wonder what it'll look like when, every church that's looking to hire a young pastor looks to a residency instead of to a college because it becomes the norm, and what that might mean for the local church. To have people coming in that are that equipped and that trained. Perhaps we could do something, what it would mean when that 80% of young pastors who get out of ministry within 5 years begins to be 20%, and we flip that number around because of residency.
Imagine what it looks like in the years ahead as this continues to catch fire and local churches, district, headquarters, and our college and universities are true partners, not competitors.
What would it look like if residents were launched into massive church planting efforts and we began to see new churches emerge as a result of faithful residents? What would it look like if we saw dying churches revitalized because of resident pastors who had fresh energy and life and came in and believed that the church could still exist?